Good evening. This is the January 19th Board of Education Finance and Operations Committee meeting. First thing on our agenda tonight is public comment, but there is no one signed up for public comment. Is there anyone in the room that wants to give a public comment? All right. Hearing none. If you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Construction phasing schedule. And then December monthly financial report and then anything else that the renewal is coming up. So let me hand it over to Mr. Wellman.
Actually, good evening. With the facilities update for the referendum projects, the first thing that we're going to talk about here is Fisher Elementary School. As we looked at this construction with renovating the existing space, 6 classroom and restroom addition, along with all the other renovations we have in the corridor and the classrooms, when we started working on this with an ICI, looking at the phasing of the schedules, we're going to kind of run this like we did at Edison, where in the first phase, this addition is the first thing that we'll start to do in March. The problem out at Fisher, that's why we're building the 6 classroom additions, there's really no extra space in that building to give us to shift some things around for us to start working on that. This classroom addition will be done. Once this is complete before the start of school, along with this corridor and office, we'll give them time, once they get these classrooms, that's extra space in the building. And then once they start repurposing some of these other spaces into these extra space, extra rooms we've given them, we'll come in and wall this off around December, Christmas break, and then take over this section. In December and throughout the rest of the school year, we'll renovate this space, which is going to be the new library, media center, and maker space. And then once we're done with that, come the summer, all the things in pink, the summer of 23, we'll sit there and do the rest of the renovations in Fisher with the corridors, the HVAC system, and all those, and reconfiguring some of these offices, new staff lounge, which was over here, which will be here, along with some of these other classroom and breakout space. What we looked at it was too much to try to get done in 1 year, and this is, it worked out very well at Edison, so this is the phasing schedule that we're looking to do for Fisher for their projects. I didn't explain it. Initially, we're looking, when we first met out there with ICI and myself and the principal, trying to get it all done in 1 year, but as we started really looking at it and talking with the principal, we just didn't feel it was doable. Because if we come up with a little blip, this interior renovations here is a lot, and she couldn't really move anything out there. And then, the biggest thing is to make sure she has these classrooms and the space. This gives her extra classrooms than what she has right now, so she can move some of the things out of there. And it's more of a seamless transition for the building, for this construction schedule. It's not on a scale with, the 18 million of Edison, but it's going to be a tough remodel and addition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and plus we have to get in there and do the asbestos abatement in there, so that's going to take some time. So with this staging, we can sit there over, once we get this done, come Christmas break, we can start to do some of the abatement in over here when there's nobody in the building, and then we'll build a wall on the other side of this corridor, and then we can continue to do our work in there while school's in session without affecting school.
Okay, so what does that do for any costs or bringing people in again?
There's a little bit of, you'll see in the next slide, just a little bit of additional administrative costs and logistic cost, on the phasing, since it's going to take from, March of 22 all the way to August of 23, but not that much.
So you'll cover that, because I don't have my computer, but all I saw was this picture. I didn't know exactly what you were going to talk about. So of course I start asking.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So for those family members, community members that might not have been around during the Edison renovation, that first March 22, September 22, that one, thank you, Todd, that section, that will not cause disruption to learning in the building during that time, correct?
Correct.
So it'll be business as usual for those community members that may not have been paying attention during that Edison renovation. How much kind of disarray will the school be in during that January through August 23?
With this one,
Yeah, I know you say the wall will be built up, but I mean, there'll still be learning going on in those classrooms and the least amount of disruption as possible, correct?
yes, once we build this wall, all this will be vacated and moved to other parts of the building. There'll just be a wall here, so as they walk down the corridor, it's like they have a solid wall right there, so they won't even know we're in there.
Great, thank you.
The one thing I just want to point out too, no disruption, normal business. The only thing is right now there's an exterior door right here where the kids do come out and go to the playground. Part of that, they will have to, make a little bit longer trek to the playground. So that's about the only disruption we have. When we have traffic coming into this building, just like we've done on some other projects during drop-off or pickup, we'll make sure no truck traffic is there, so we won't interrupt the drop-off and pickup time for students and staff.
You want to ask questions at the end or now?
You can ask now.
Is all of this bid, none of this is bid?
All this, we are open these bids tomorrow.
You're opening bids tomorrow based on this phase. So is it
Yes.
bid, and you're bidding the work that's out in 23 as well?
Yes,
You're bidding all the work, capturing the risk now based on that stuff?
correct.
You're opening bids tomorrow, that'll be at a board meeting.
In February.
For March 7th.
Yes.
I see I must know that.
Okay. Now I can move up here. I don't need my little hand thing. Okay, with the Jefferson. Jefferson, just give you the scope, is, the renovations of the building, providing air conditioning, a lot of things up there. We talk about new media center. Based off of some of the comments that we had last year at the board meeting, based on when the board approved Jackson and Field, that they were a little bit higher because of the market, we went back and re-forecasted or re-estimated. We had ICI re-estimate Jefferson. They did a page turn of everything out there. They have identified changes from design development to invitation to bid, and then they made some appropriate adjustments based on the results we saw on Jackson and for general trades, HVAC, and electrical. So as you sit there at the bottom referendum budget, that was the budget that was stated a long time ago. What we've been presenting to the board and everything was a $7 million cost estimate for Jefferson. Based on that cost estimate on the bid that we had ICI do the exercise, they anticipated it coming in at $8.8 million. We opened the bids last week, and the bids for the estimates that come in right now is $7.9 million. That's assuming we have a budgetary number in there for asbestos, which we're not opening until February, and ICI still has one more trade to scope review. So that's why it's an estimate right there. So as we can see, we looked at it based on some good news here. It's not, Jefferson was way high. So it's Jefferson is not as high of the bids from the estimate as Jackson was. So, we thought it was going to be up there, almost $1.8 million higher. It's actually only $900,000 higher. So that was the exercise that we did with Jefferson. Now, these bids will, once they finish their scope review, they'll have a recommendation, and that will be presented to the board next week for board approval for this construction work. We also did the same thing with Fisher. Everything exactly what we did with Jefferson, and this one we just increased the staffing costs just a little bit to accommodate that construction phasing that you saw, because that was something that we had back when we did the cost estimate for the design development. So with this one, based off of those same factors of looking at it, looking at the scope, looking at the market adjustments, it's now anticipated that Fisher potentially could be at 10.9. We are opening those bids, tomorrow at 2:00 in this room. So hopefully it falls in between that, more closer to the 8.8 like Jefferson did, instead of on that top end. But that was just part of the process that we did based off of the market conditions that are out there to relook at the estimates that we have. So with that in there, just to give you kind of where we're at as a summary, this is still as of December 14th when the board approved Jackson and Field. So this kind of gives you the summary of where we're at with everything, that based off of the bids that they have approved out there, we're potentially looking at almost 15.8 million of additional scope and things that we have out there. This does not include potentially that extra $900,000 for Jefferson, because the numbers are not finalized yet, because they're still doing a scope review, and it does not take in anything for Fisher. So what I'm looking at doing is, once I have the recommendations for Fisher, and we'll have the bids, get the recommendation for Jefferson, tomorrow, and that will be presented to the board, and then I'll get the bids in tomorrow for Fisher. Based on those bids with Fisher and the recommendation for Jefferson, I will update this for the board on Tuesday night with that in there. I didn't want to change these numbers, and then they might change again tomorrow with Jefferson, and then it might change again with Fisher. So that's why I didn't update that. I left this exactly how it was back on December 14th when they approved Field and Jackson and some other pre-purchase equipment for Fisher and Jefferson. So as with that right now, that 15.8, if the board went forward and approved the Jefferson, then that would be 16.7 then.
I wasn't here last time, I apologize for that. When you say additional scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think of, we've added, I think the district added scope to the job.
Yes.
We added an addition, we got into it and said, I need to do this versus that, because we're now smarter than we were before. That 15.8 million number, that's really just giving me the over-under, right? Is it 13 million additional, what, like, I'm going to capture it, right?
Yep.
I mean, what is truly, do we have a breakdown of, we've added this much to this referendum project? Because it's the right thing to do, right?
Yes.
And do we have a sense of what that is? Because it really, when you get into it, right, you had a concept plan that starts this big, and then you get into it and you say, that's a dumb idea, we need to do these other things. And for me, that's always helpful, because you judge over and under by a number, but it doesn't really tell you, hey, by the way, we did an entire 4 more classrooms than we ever thought we were going to do, because it's the right thing to do for the district. That's, looking at this, that's when I see additional scope, I think of, you told them to draw and them to build more stuff, then they drew what they're supposed to drew, and we're just over budget by $16 million. Those are two different things. And I think, to me, that, if I'm a taxpayer, that's the important part of it. To me, if we're spending the money and doing the diligent project process of it, that's different than, we just cost more money, right? And we're over budget. Those are, and if that's hard to do, I understand, but I'm sure there's stuff, it happens on every job. Every job.
And that's where it kind of puts there. We've added an additional scope with making Field bigger.
Completely new section.
a new section out there. The additions at Jefferson and Jackson, and the bigger classroom addition at Fisher. So we've added about $13.5 million of additional work into this project.
So that's that 13.4
Yes,
number.
yep,
So of the 50 million over, 13.4 is we truly.
added more work to the project,
purchasing more than we want.
correct.
Increased, oh, sorry. Can you define what was increased scope at Jefferson?
The addition, the Library Media Center addition. Because initially in there, on the referendum, it just said library renovations. So as you look at it, as we're sitting there doing these renovations, you know, their library, to get the library space and the maker space and everything that was, you know, for building readiness of these classrooms, we really couldn't do it in the existing space. So that's when we recommended putting an addition out there. So that's why Jefferson and Jackson has that addition for the library media space that also gives them the maker space too. And then with Fisher, initially it was, I think, a 2-classroom addition. Now we're at a 6-classroom. Based on the needs of the facility at the time, currently. Yeah.
Can you go back 2 slides? Just so we don't all get our hopes up. The 7.9, that's the estimate. Do you guys have any flyers, meaning drastically different numbers on bid day? Meaning I had a contractor come in $400,000 different than the second guy, right? Like a number 2 bid analysis. We can't hope for the rainbow on the other side, so to speak, and that, like, I just don't want everybody walking out here thinking that the 10 million is going to come in at 9 or 8 because we had one successful day.
When we estimate around the number 2 and 3 bidder, we'll put the estimates together.
Terry, can you grab a mic, please?
When we put together the estimates, we're looking at the number in 2 and 3 bidder range. That's where Mark Parskin is benchmarking around. So there could be outliers.
So what that means is the low bids are 7.9. If we took the bid tabulation that they have and took the average between the number 2 and number 3 bidders on that bid tab, say they got 5 bidders, if they took the number 2 and number 3 and averaged it out, their estimator is trying to track to that 8.7.
That's correct.
That would equalize, right? So
Yes.
we do not want to be the low bidder because you can't count on, right?
Right.
It's not in the district's best interest.
The market still has some dynamic to it, but we opened bids in Prairie Grove last week, and we were within $300,000 of the estimate. So maybe closer than we'd like to be, but with still a little better handle on it than we had 6-8 months ago.
And the DD was done 6 months ago? When was DD?
September,
Well, the DD was done in September of 20.
end of September, I think.
Yeah, in September. So this has just been updated for market conditions and so forth based on what we've seen in a couple of the other projects here.
Basically based on this year's round of
Yes, craziness, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this topic?
Well, because Rob, you were talking about just setting expectation between the cost estimate, IFB, and the bid estimate, right?
Yeah, on the next, Todd is a glass half full kind of guy, which is why we love him.
Yep.
And he's hoping the 10.9 comes in under, which we all would enjoy. I just don't want everybody walking out here thinking that's the case, because until it's open, until you see the bids and everybody actually locks it in, we're having stuff happen, to be honest, that we've never happened before with people walking away from numbers more and more now than they ever have. So it's not to Terry's point, of a dynamic situation, and I would tend to agree with that statement. But I just don't want you walking out here hedging that's $9 million.
That'd be great.
Hope it's not 11.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else?
Anyone have anything optimistic to say? All right. There we go. All right. Then,
That might not be optimistic. I'm just telling you, you can find cheaper gas in Cook County. You should be shocked at that by itself. And they got a scan and go app. You can get it for like, it's serious, 25 cents cheaper.
oh,
They might have jacked it up because I've been telling everybody.
it is fantastic. All right. Then we'll move on to the December monthly financial reports.
Yes. Yes. The December monthly financial reports, not going to go into great detail. So we are outperforming budget at this point in the year. We've talked about this a little bit before. We can't fill positions at education assistant positions. We're short on food service staff by about a third. Substitutes, that sort of thing, but that is helping us outperform budget at this point in the year. This is my favorite chart right here. You kind of can see the dark black line is the revenue line. The dotted black line is last year's revenue line. So you can see that the revenues are doing are higher this year than last year when you look at that dark black line compared to the dotted line. Where the expenditure line, when you compare the dark red line compared to the dotted line, we are tracking just almost identical to last year. So that is kind of explains that this year is doing better. The revenues are outperforming budget. The state has been timely with their revenues. The property taxes have done better than I mean, in line with what we budgeted, but definitely looking like the year is shaping up better than budget at this point. So that kind of is a good visual of where we're at. That's really all I wanted to say about the monthly financials.
Okay. Any questions about the monthly financials?
Well,
Karen?
Chris, when you talk about the custodial, the educational assistants, the substitutes, District 205 is in no different position than other districts, right?
Correct. We are looking at this nationwide. I think it's everything I read is talking about the shortage in those areas. Also, bus drivers is another area but we are outsourced for bus drivers, so we don't see that as much. Nurses is another thing, and we're outsourced for that as well. Those are all areas that schools are having trouble all over the country.
And then from the food service, I know that during COVID, they were unemployed. Are you saying that not everybody came back to work for us when we brought them back last year? I think it was.
Yes,
that
we
what you're
tried
saying?
to get them all back,
Right.
but some did not come back. Some retired,
Okay.
and so just trying to find them. Cheryl's getting by, and we are providing lunches. Obviously, they have supply chain issues in food, but we continue to provide the lunches, and we're getting by. But she's struggling, but we're getting by with the food service.
And you're trying to fill those spots
Oh yes,
actively?
they're posted. Yep.
Okay. And when you say that people hadn't come back, is it due to COVID? You said some retired, but people aren't waiting for some major shift in safety policy, whatever, before coming back. Is that, I'm just trying to get a sense of, is it COVID? Is it just timing, or is it going to be a longer term issue? Do you have any idea? I'm just trying to get a sense. And
I think everyone is struggling with how to respond to this labor shortage.
right, okay.
So
Okay, because that's the next place that my head went to is, if we're short substitutes or educational assistants, we can make do for some time, but if it's a longer term thing, what are we doing, or what do you need from us to be creative or to work with whomever to kind of redesign? How else do we accommodate? What is the need? What's the gap? And how do we maybe do something different versus trying to fill it the same way that we traditionally have, which maybe will never be there. I mean,
Well,
I'm just starting to get to that point on a few things, and
the
just
food service group of employees are non-union, and the board looks at their annual raises once a year. And so, I mean, obviously, the board, the HR department, the superintendent will all try to work on a comprehensive plan related to salaries for next year is what I'm thinking. I haven't really discussed this, but I mean,
this is a committee meeting, not a
Yeah.
board meeting, so that's why I thought it was okay to kind of throw the brainstorming out there.
I mean, we started negotiating with the custodians for their contract is up at the end of this year, and we've received the notice to bargain, so we will start negotiating with the custodians in the near future. So there's the non-union, and then administrators. There just has to be a comprehensive look at all of the salaries.
Chris, I appreciate you saying that, and we know that this is kind of not just in education, but staffing shortages in a lot of different industries are happening right now. And I think, and Karen, not to put words in your mouth, but I think what I hear you saying is, what is our strategy moving forward? It sounds like salaries is one of them, or looking at hourly wages and maybe doing market analysis to we want to remain competitive. We know that there's staffing shortages and low numbers of people who are available. And so out of that small pool, just want to make sure that we're offering good packages to people so that when they are looking for jobs, we remain in competition with our peers. And then also thinking, and I'm open to thinking kind of wide and large too, things that maybe we haven't done in our district in the past. I'm not saying we should do these things, but thinking about all the ideas. What can we outsource? What are there people who are, maybe I could take food service for an example, who have maybe more buying power or more width to their business and can help solve some of these problems for us. So I'm open, I'm just speaking for myself, to hearing all different types of solutions and putting them all out there for us to consider, knowing that this is likely to be our environment for the short-term future, and maybe even a little longer than we're all comfortable with.
I mean, to put it in broad perspective, I think the numbers are something like there are over 10 million unfilled jobs in this country right now and 6 million people looking for work. So there's clearly an imbalance, and the balance is slowly coming back. So all we can do is wait and see. All right, Chris, anything else? Anything else for Chris? All right. Karen? Oh, no, we have a couple other things here. As soon as I get my iPad back. All right, so the next section is additional updates. Anybody with an additional update? No? All right. Then we have two upcoming meetings. January 25th, our regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock in this room. And February 8th, our regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock in this room. There's nothing else on the agenda unless somebody has something the last minute. Hearing nothing, then our meeting's adjourned.